Imagine a world untouched. Towering, snow-capped peaks pierced a boundless sky, and ancient forests held the breath of centuries. This was the raw, untamed canvas of the American West in the early to mid-19th century, home to the legendary American mountain men. These rugged individualists built their homes by hand in spots we'd consider paradise today. Hidden valleys by crystal-clear rivers, or clearings offering breathtaking panoramic views. These weren't just temporary shelters. Many were substantial cabins, crafted with sweat and hope. Yet, as the 19th century unfolded, a strange pattern emerged. These idyllic, perfectly situated cabins were often left to decay, reclaimed by the very wilderness they once tamed. Why would men who poured their essence into these havens simply walk away? The answer is a complex tapestry woven from economic upheaval, relentless demographic shifts, and the deeply ingrained, restless spirit of the mountain man himself. Join us as we journey back in time to uncover the compelling reasons behind these forgotten frontier dreams. Chapter 1. The Allure of the Beaver and the Strategic Life of the Trapper. To truly grasp why these seemingly perfect cabins were later abandoned, we must first immerse ourselves in the captivating and perilous world that lured these men westward. The North American fur trade. More specifically, the insatiable global demand for beaver pelts. In the early 1800s, a beaver hat wasn't merely a fashion accessory. It was the ultimate symbol of status, wealth, and sophistication in the grand drawing rooms of London, Paris, and the burgeoning cities of the eastern United States. This intense, almost feverish demand created an economic engine so powerful it pulled adventurous spirits, daring entrepreneurs, and restless souls deeper and deeper into the vast, uncharted wilderness of the American West. The American mountain men weren't just adventurers stumbling through the wild. They were highly specialized, incredibly skilled, and deeply motivated entrepreneurs. Their entire existence revolved around the annual cycle of trapping. From the moment the ice thawed in spring until the bitter onset of winter, their days were consumed by the pursuit of beaver. A good cabin site, therefore, was far more than just a place to lay one's head at night. It was a strategic operational base, a meticulously chosen stronghold in a hostile environment. Imagine a sturdy log cabin, often built with impressive ingenuity from local timber, positioned perfectly near a winding stream known to be teeming with beaver. This location wasn't accidental. It offered immediate and vital access to their primary quarry, minimizing travel time and maximizing efficiency. Beyond just beaver access, these cabins provided crucial shelter from the brutal, often deadly, Rocky Mountain winters. Blizzards could rage for days, burying everything in feet of snow, and temperatures could plummet to unimaginable lows. Without a well-built shelter, survival was a gamble. Within the rough-hewn walls of these cabins, they stored their precious supplies. Dozens of iron traps, valuable salt for curing hides, gunpowder and lead for casting bullets, and perhaps even a rare luxury like coffee beans or tobacco. It was also a secure place to process their valuable furs, carefully skinning, stretching, drying, and bundling them for the highly anticipated annual rendezvous. Those chaotic, exhilarating, and often lawless gatherings where trappers met with supply trains from the east to trade their year's catch for new provisions and a taste of civilization. While some cabins were indeed temporary, hastily erected for a single season, historical accounts and archaeological discoveries increasingly reveal that many were quite substantial. Evidence suggests sturdy foundations, well-built hearths indicating prolonged use, and even remnants of small plots for growing basic vegetables. These were places where a man might spend multiple consecutive winters, truly carving out a life and a sense of permanence in the wild. The ideal spot consistently featured proximity to reliable fresh water sources, abundant game trails for sustenance, defensible positions against potential threats, and, critically, that profound sense of isolation and untamed wilderness that many of these men craved above all else. They were, in essence, the undisputed masters of their immediate domain, living a life of unparalleled self-reliance and raw independence, all powered by the relentless, lucrative pursuit of the elusive beaver. This intricate connection between the beaver, the cabin, and the economic landscape of the early 19th century is the foundation upon which their story, and ultimately their departure, is built. Chapter 2. The economic tides turn, the collapse of the fur trade. But even the most robust and seemingly inexhaustible economic engines can falter, and often, the very success that propels them leads to their eventual demise. The burgeoning beaver trade, which had fueled the mountain man's existence and carved out his place in the wilderness, was no exception. The relentless, large-scale trapping, year after year, by hundreds of trappers pushing deeper into virgin territories, began to take its inevitable and devastating toll. Beaver populations, once so incredibly abundant they seemed limitless, started to dwindle dramatically in the more easily accessible trapping grounds of the Rocky Mountains and beyond. The immediate consequence of this depletion was a significant drop in catch rates. What once might have been a profitable season with relatively little effort now required days, even weeks, of strenuous and often fruitless work to secure a meager number of pelts. This forced trappers to push ever deeper into truly remote, unexplored, and often more dangerous territories. A cabin that was once perfectly situated in a rich, thriving beaver watershed might now be miles, or even days, from any remaining viable beaver streams. The effort-to-reward ratio skewed dramatically, making the arduous life of a trapper less financially rewarding and increasingly unsustainable. The economic incentive that had drawn these men into the wilderness, that had justified their incredible hardships and risks, was slowly but surely eroding. The golden age of the American fur trade reached its zenith in the mid-1830s. The great annual rendezvous, those legendary boisterous gatherings where thousands of trappers, traders, and Native Americans converged to exchange furs for supplies, began to shrink in size and vibrancy. The mood among the mountain men shifted from optimistic endeavor to growing concern. Then came the final, fatal blow, delivered not by depleted resources in the wilderness, but by a fickle change in distant European fashion. By the late 1830s and early 1840s, the sleek, lightweight, and sophisticated silk hat began to eclipse the heavy, somewhat cumbersome beaver felt hat in popularity across the fashionable drawing rooms of London, Paris, and the eastern United States. This wasn't a gradual decline. It was a relatively swift and devastating market shift. Suddenly, the primary demand for their hard-won pelts evaporated almost overnight. The market for beaver fur plummeted, and with it, the price. For the mountain men, this economic collapse was catastrophic. Their entire livelihood, their reason for being in the wilderness, was tied directly to the value of beaver fur. Without a viable market, their immense efforts were rendered worthless. Those great cabin spots, once bustling with activity and promising a steady income from nearby trapping grounds, became economically obsolete. The very purpose of their existence in that particular location had dissolved. For a man whose entire existence revolved around the profitability of trapping, staying put in an exhausted, now valueless trapping ground was not just impractical, it was a path to destitution. The land itself hadn't changed, the beauty remained, but its economic value, at least for them, had plummeted to near zero. This forced a stark and immediate choice for every mountain man: adapt to a radically changed world, or move on in search of a new purpose, a new frontier, or simply a new way to survive. This profound economic shift was arguably the single most impactful factor in the widespread abandonment of their cherished wilderness homes. Chapter 3. The relentless march of civilization, settlers, and society. While the economic backbone of the fur trade withered away, another, equally powerful and ultimately unstoppable force was reshaping the very landscape and destiny of the American West. The relentless, often overwhelming westward expansion of American settlement. Close on the heels of the mountain men, often guided by the very trails they had blazed and the knowledge they had painstakingly acquired, came waves of homesteaders, farmers, ranchers, and prospectors. These newcomers arrived with a distinctly different vision for the land, not as a wild resource to be harvested and left untamed, but as territory to be claimed, cultivated, and irrevocably transformed into a reflection of the society they had left behind. What was once pristine, untamed wilderness, the solitary domain of the mountain man, was now being meticulously surveyed, divided, fenced, and ultimately plowed under. Ancient forests were cleared for timber and to make way for agricultural fields. Rivers, once free-flowing arteries of the wild, were increasingly dammed or diverted for irrigation. Slowly but surely, towns and permanent settlements began to spring up, often in places where mountain men had once silently set their traps or built their secluded cabins. For many mountain men, whose very identity was inextricably intertwined with their profound independence and the deep solitude of the wild, this relentless encroachment was nothing short of an invasion. It was an assault on their way of life, a slow strangulation of the freedom they cherished above all else. The establishment of formal land ownership further complicated matters, creating direct conflicts. Most mountain men built their temporary or semi-permanent cabins on what they considered open, communal wilderness, land that belonged to no one, or rather, to everyone. They didn't operate with legal deeds, titles, or government-sanctioned claims. As territories became organized, with federal land offices opening and legal frameworks for property ownership being put in place, these informal cabin sites became incredibly vulnerable. A settler, arriving with a freshly stamped government land patent, could legally claim the very plot where a mountain man had toiled to build his home, forcing him off with the backing of nascent law enforcement. The frontier, which had once seemed boundless, was closing, and with it, the era of unlimited open range and unrestricted movement. The very presence of permanent settlements, of new neighbors, established roads, schools, and eventually burgeoning communities with their own rules and social expectations, eroded the wildness that the mountain men sought and thrived within. Their cabins, once symbols of self-reliance and mastery over the wilderness, became inconvenient obstacles in the path of a rapidly industrializing, agricultural society. For men who valued boundless freedom and self-determination above all else, adapting to a settled, law-abiding, domesticated existence was often an unbearable thought. They simply couldn't breathe in a world that was suddenly confined by fences, property lines, and the constant presence of others. The frontier was less about hunting and trapping, and more about planting crops and raising families. This fundamental clash of values and lifestyles made continued residence in many of these once ideal cabin spots utterly untenable for the true mountain man. Chapter 4. The Restless Spirit. Personal Motivations and the Lure of the Unknown. Beyond the powerful economic forces and the relentless march of civilization, there lies perhaps the most profound and deeply personal reason for the abandonment of these seemingly perfect cabin sites: the very inherent nature and restless spirit of the mountain men themselves. These were not men who dreamed of a quiet life in a picket-fenced farm or a cozy, predictable home in a bustling town. They were drawn to the frontier by a visceral, almost primal desire for something more: the raw thrill of the hunt, the profound challenge of survival against formidable odds, the intoxicating allure of endless, uncharted horizons. They were, in many cases, solitary by choice, finding a deep solace and strength in the vast, silent wilderness that few others could comprehend. Consider their personalities. Many had come from troubled pasts, or simply from lives that felt too confined, too predictable. They sought an existence where their only master was the wilderness itself, where laws were often self-imposed, and where courage and cunning were the true currency. While some mountain men did eventually integrate into the new frontier towns, becoming invaluable guides for emigrant trains, scouts for the burgeoning U.S. Army, or shrewd traders in nascent settlements, a significant number simply weren't wired for a settled existence. The very notion of domesticity, of being confined to one spot, contradicted the very essence of who they were. Their hearts belonged to the open range, to the untamed river where fish ran free, to the towering peaks where human laws held little sway. A meticulously built cabin, no matter how comfortable or strategically located, could quickly begin to feel like a gilded cage to a man whose spirit craved boundless exploration. Their highly developed resilience, their incredible adaptability, and their fierce independence, the very qualities that made them absolute masters of the wilderness and successful in their trade, also made them profoundly restless when faced with the constraints and demands of encroaching civilization. The mundane daily routines of farming, the rigid social demands of a burgeoning community, the absence of immediate danger or grand adventure, simply didn't resonate with their adventurous, often untamed souls. They thrived on unpredictability, on the constant challenge of pitting their wits against nature. Many were essentially itinerants by nature. They followed the game, migrating with the seasons, chasing the promise of new discoveries, or simply answering the magnetic pull of the unknown. A cabin, while a welcome respite from the biting cold of winter or the driving rains of spring, was rarely viewed as a permanent anchor. It was a temporary base camp, a place to rest and resupply before the next journey. The idea of rooting themselves permanently, of abandoning the endless possibilities that lay just beyond the next ridge, was often an anathema. They were pioneers in the truest sense of the word, always looking for the next horizon, the next challenge, the next virgin stretch of untamed land. This deep-seated wanderlust, this unquenchable thirst for the wild, played a crucial, often overlooked role in their willingness to walk away from even the most great and comfortable cabin spots. Their homes were wherever the trail led them, not a fixed point on a map. Chapter 5. The Unforgiving Hand of Nature and Intertribal Conflicts. Even the most perfectly chosen cabin spot remained at the mercy of the wilderness's raw power. Nature, beautiful as it was, could also be relentlessly unforgiving. A great location today could become an uninhabitable disaster zone tomorrow. Floods could inundate river valleys, sweeping away structures and vital supplies. Forest fires, ignited by lightning or even accidental human carelessness, could sweep through timbered areas, obliterating everything in their path and destroying hunting grounds for years to come. Landslides could suddenly alter entire landscapes, rendering a once sheltered cabin dangerously exposed. A particularly brutal winter, with record snowfall or sustained bitter cold, could render a location completely inaccessible, isolating a trapper for months and making hunting and trapping virtually impossible. While not the primary, overarching reason for the widespread abandonment, sudden and severe natural events undoubtedly forced many a mountain man to pack up and seek more favorable, less hazardous terrain. The wilderness offered opportunity, but it also demanded constant vigilance and respect for its formidable power. Furthermore, the interactions with various Native American tribes became an increasingly complex and dangerous factor. As westward expansion intensified, tensions escalated. While many mountain men forged strong, mutually beneficial relationships with Native American communities, often learning their languages and survival techniques, conflicts were also a stark reality. A seemingly safe cabin site could quickly become a target or be situated in a contested territory, forcing its inhabitants to abandon it for safer ground. The constant threat of raiding parties or tribal warfare, especially as resources dwindled and territories were encroached upon, added another layer of risk to an already perilous existence, sometimes making even the most comfortable cabin untenable. The frontier was a land of opportunity, but also of constant vigilance and potential conflict. So, the story of why American mountain men abandoned their great cabin spots is not a simple tale of choice, but a complex narrative woven from powerful converging forces. It was the devastating collapse of the beaver fur trade that ripped away their economic livelihood. It was the relentless, unstoppable westward expansion of settlers that consumed their beloved wilderness and imposed a structured society they couldn't abide. It was their own indomitable, restless spirits, inherently unsuited for domesticity, that propelled them deeper into the shrinking wild. And it was the unpredictable, unforgiving hand of nature and the ever-present threat of intertribal conflicts that added layers of peril to their already arduous lives. Today, the faint, decaying remnants of these cabins, a few weathered logs, a collapsed chimney, a faint outline in the earth, stand as silent, poignant monuments to a vanished era. They are more than just forgotten structures. They are echoes of incredible hardship, unparalleled freedom, and a profound, intimate connection to a land that was still largely wild. They serve as a powerful reminder that even the most great and desirable locations are subject to the relentless, transformative currents of time and human ambition. The American mountain men, in their abandonment of these once cherished spots, weren't simply leaving behind wood and stone. They were leaving behind an entire way of life, a rugged individualism that helped forge a nation, forever etching their adventurous spirit into the very fabric of American history and inspiring generations to seek their own frontier, whatever it may be.